Good morning, America. Thanks for joining us here on the Andy Kirkendall Show, where Andy interviews actors, writers, filmmakers, athletes, musicians, songwriters, and more, and asks them, what do you do and why do you do it? So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy the show.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Moments. Thank you for joining me today. Today I have a guest that's been nearly a year in the making, trying to getting times and getting him to get scheduled. So I'm so thrilled to be able to get him on Morning Moments today. He's an actor, a producer, an author of the book Finding God in Hollywood. Of all places to find God, you could find him in Hollywood, and Nathan will tell you about that. Nathan Clarkson, welcome to Morning Moments.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It is an honor to be here, Andy.
I'm so interested in the name of the book, and I'm sure you'll share more about that. Well, Nathan, let me ask you the big question I ask everybody. What do you do, and why do you do it?
Well, that is a loaded question, and you know it. There's a lot there, and um, man, where do I start? When I was a young boy, I will start when I was a young boy. I'll tell you, I grew up in a family that loved stories. I was introduced and exposed to great stories at an early age. My parents are writers and lovers of literature. And so that those stories went deep into my soul and my heart. And those stories were in the form of movies and books. And then I started writing my own stories out of my love for them. And I started spending all of my spare time crafting, thinking of worlds and narratives. And then as I got older, I started looking at what I want to do with my life and looking at the things I loved, and it was stories. Now, this was alongside something else I was very passionate about and introduced to at an early age, which was my faith, which was an introduction and a connection and a relationship with God. And at that young age, my love for stories, my love for faith, I didn't yet see how they combined. I didn't see how they were parallel or what connection or overlap they had. But as I grew older, what I began to see as I looked at my faith and I looked at my love for stories is that the love for stories I had in my heart was placed there by God. And I think that God is a story loving God. I think that he has created us, his people, and I mean everyone, I mean every human on earth is a story oriented creature. I think if we look at how God shared his voice through scripture, we see a story, right? It starts in the beginning, the greatest beginning to a book ever, when we see that he's weaving a story throughout history. And we see all through the Old Testament he's telling a story of his people. And then we get to the New Testament and we find Jesus, and you're going, all right, this is God's presence, the physical presence on earth. Does he like stories? And what do we find? How do we find that he shares his ideas, his thoughts, his theology, his messages? He shares them through parables. And so what I realized as I grew older is that my love for story and my love of my faith, they weren't these mutually exclusive things. They were oriented and root from the same place. That stories are a creation of God, and it's a way that he has helped us articulate and understand him and reality. And so when it came time to decide what I want to do with my life, it wasn't just a profession, it was a calling. That when I was going to step into the future, that when I decided to become an actor and a writer and a filmmaker and an author, and tell stories, everything I do was around stories. That I was actually stepping into something that God loved and God loves using to bring people to him. And so all that is a long way to say that I'm an actor, I am a filmmaker, I am an author, and I am a film producer. I already said that. But all I have to say is everything I do is centers around stories. And the reason I do it, so that's what I do, but the reason I do it is because I believe that stories can change hearts and inspire minds and ultimately draw people to God. And that's what I want to do. I want to use the beautiful, wonderful God created art of story to draw people through my stories to him. And my stories are imperfect. They're not, they're made by human hands, so they're filled with flaws and imperfections, but my hope is that God can still use my stories to, in some way, shape, or form, draw people to him. Yeah, so that is what I do and why I do it in a nutshell.
Yeah, and God has the people he uses are they're called humans, and that's what he has to use. And
I don't know
when
what
you were
I'm
talking,
thinking.
when you were talking, I was thinking if Jesus came to Earth and gave his sacrifice now versus back when he did, I'm wondering if he would have had camera crews just all around him all the time. You
Absolutely.
got to capture this. You got to get a picture of this here. But but the time and era that he had people writing stuff down. He had
Mm,
Luke writing things down for us. But God gave a Jesus who is the greatest storyteller of all times. And so
amen.
I think that's the greatest example for filmmakers and actors and producers and even writers. Jesus was a storyteller.
Yes, that is what has inspired me. And that was such a revelation for me when I realized, because, listen, I was a teenager and I wanted to be an actor. Like, I wanted to be in movies, right, and be famous. But beneath that, because that was there, of course, but beneath that, I wanted there to be a bigger reason that I was doing this. And when I figured out that, it just clicked for me when I figured out that Jesus was the original storyteller, that God is a storyteller. I said, oh, I can act in the image of God by creating stories. And my stories will never be as great or as beautiful, as wonderful as his. But like you said, for whatever reason, he decided to work with humans. So what I can spend my life doing is trying to tell stories that can reach the hearts of people. Because that's what Jesus did while he was on earth. He walked around his dusty town and he told people stories. But these stories that we know as parables, they changed people's lives. And ultimately, those stories changed the world. And so I think, in this idea that he says, be like me, that we're supposed to image God. And in my particular calling, I'm trying to image God as a storyteller. I'm trying to tell stories like the ones he told that will hopefully bring people closer to him and change people's hearts and minds in a way that is redemptive and beautiful.
How many people have we heard said, I saw this TV show, I saw this movie, and it changed my life. It changed the way I thought. And it doesn't even have to be about our spirituality. Maybe their calling came from, maybe they joined the military because of a movie. Maybe it was they became a doctor because of a movie. Movies have that powerful ability to bring a story to life to them.
Yeah, they really do. It's interesting you touch on this idea that stories have this intrinsic power. And that's a beautiful and also terrifying thing, because right now you see a lot of the harm, I would say, in the world comes from people believing stories that are untrue. And the thing is, stories have power, and so if you tell a compelling story, it has the power to change someone, but that also has the power to change them into something negative or destructive. And so what I see going on in Hollywood and around the world are people are telling stories and they have that power to touch people, and they are, but so often they're filled with these destructive messages that don't
Yeah.
bring life. And so, what I want to do is take that. I think God has infused stories with power. He's made us react to and respond to them, but we need better, more beautiful stories being told. And I think that's what I want Christians to understand. We can argue theology all day. That's important. I love good theology. We can argue about politics all day, and I'm not saying that politics aren't important, but at the end of the day, if you want to change hearts, utilize the power that story has in it, because that is the thing. As you pointed out, stories can inspire people's trajectory of life into
Yes.
how they conduct their marriages, how they raise their children, what they do with what professions they go into, how they treat other people. Stories can inspire and shape our minds and imaginations into the ways that we act in the world. And so if we want to change culture, if we want to change people, if we want to see a more beautiful world, we have to be telling stories that image and reflect God's truth. And I'm not talking just cheesy stories that always have a prayer in them. I'm talking just beautiful, true stories
Yeah.
that bring people into an understanding of God. Madeleine L'Engle, who wrote Wrinkle in Time, she said that if it's good and a quality piece of art, then it's Christian art. And I totally believe that. I believe that if it's good, it is reflecting the good that God has put into the world. And so that is what I desire to do.
When you were talking, I was thinking about 38, 39 of my Facebook friends that are mutual with you, I've interviewed, and we've got a connection with a lot of different folks, and there's a great community, and there's a lot of people doing good things. What have you got going on in the future?
Well, right now, man, Tony Stark, not Tony Stark, who's the actor. That's funny that I think of him like that. Um, Robert Downey Jr. a while ago in an interview said that he doesn't idle well. He doesn't like being bored. So when you ask me the question about what do I have going on, I have to think, all right, which five things should I mention right now? Because I have, as I was telling you before we started, I have overloaded myself with projects because I'm just so excited about all the things
Yeah.
I'm doing. But I'll tell you a little bit. Like I just released a book called Finding God in Hollywood. This book is essentially my memoir journey through being an actor and a filmmaker for the past 10 plus years in Hollywood and New York City. And it's the stories that I gained on set from talking to movie stars, from going to auditions, from just living in the city. And it's a city that so many people have a reaction to or a misunderstanding about. And so many Christians I've heard have said, "Oh, that's such a godless city." But God feels His presence is in all the earth, and it's His creation. And so it's essentially I look into through my stories God's presence in stories in people. And it's just it was a really heartfelt passion project book that I'm so excited to have out there because I hope it'll bring people a greater understanding of the convergence of stories and faith and give them maybe even more grace and hope for the capital city where stories today are created. So that's my book, Finding God in Hollywood. So that's one project I just released. Um, and then as far as filmmaking, I'm currently working on a film. We shot a little bit of it here in LA just about a month or two ago, and we are about to finish shooting. We're going to be out on a ranch shooting. Say it's a Western movie, like a modern Americana Western movie, romance. It has all the things you want: romance, action, intrigue, but also at the center of it is a redemptive message about hope and about being able to transform your life from something broken into something beautiful and whole. But the fun part about it is that I wrote it and I'm producing it. It's being directed by someone you interviewed. His name is Spencer Fulmar. And one of the stars in it is someone else you interviewed, Josh Murray. So if you want to see a bunch of Andy's guests in and on a movie, then check out when it comes out next year, my new movie Bright Sky. I would love for you to check it out, and it's just amazing getting to work with such amazing people. But that is currently what I'm working on right now.
Down below you could see, well, I've showed you the book cover here so that you could see the book, and go online. There's plenty of information about what Nathan's done in the past and what he's working on now, and the best is yet to come. God's got a lot of things in store for him. So check these things out. Watch out for those openings of those movies that God's put on his heart right now. And if you folks don't realize that filmmakers are thinking of new stuff, filming stuff, and in post-production of sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 different things going on at the same time. And so that's what happens. So be sure to check these things out. As we close this interview, I'm going to ask you to do something I asked of my audience, of all my guests. I want you to take a few moments as soon as this interview is over, and I want you to pray for Nathan, that God would continue to bless him and put him right at the right place at the right time. You see, folks, Nathan desperately needs your prayers, and you need the practice. So pray that God would use him in a great and mighty way. Nathan, thank you for joining me today for Morning Moments.
Andy, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, and keep coming back, and may God richly bless you.